Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Namunatira Vanachari Namunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Bhagavatam ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from Canto 10, Chapter 8, and the text is text 14. And the chapter is entitled, Lord Krishna Shows the Universal Form. So we'll be chanting responsively. Pragayam Vasudevasya Kvachijastavatmajaha Vasudeva iti Sriman Abhijnana Sampravakshate Pragjam Vasudevasyam Kvachijastavatmajaha Vasudeva iti Sriman Abhijna Sampravakshate Pragayam Vasudevasyam Kvachijastavatmajaha Vasudeva iti Sriman Abhijna Sampravakshate. Please chant. Pragayam Vasudevasya Kvachijastavatmajaha Vasudeva iti Sriman Abhijna Sampravakshate. had the last word spelled wrong. So we'll do the word for word. Prak, before. I am this child, Vasudevasya, of Vasudeva, Kvachit, sometimes. Jata, was born. Tava, your. Atmaja, Krishna, who has taken birth as your child. Vasudeva, therefore, he may be given the name Vasudeva. Iti, thus. Srimad, very beautiful. Abhigna, those who are learned. Samprakashate, also say that Krishna is Vasudeva. So the translation by Srila Prabhupada of text 14. For many reasons, this beautiful son of yours sometimes appeared previously as the son of Vasudeva. Therefore, those who are learned sometimes call this child Vasudeva. Purport. Gargamuni indirectly disclosed, quote, this child was originally born as the son of Vasudeva, although he is acting as your child. Generally, he is your child, but sometimes he is the son of Vasudeva, close quote. It's a very short purport. Om Jnanatimrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Nopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupa Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Tam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapsa Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Paramani Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Ramapada Swami Iti Namine. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Here we're having Gargamuni speaking to Nanda Maharaj, and he's informing Nanda that in a previous life, and the word used is Prag, it's that first word, his son was born in a solitary place from Vasudeva and was called Vasudeva. So this is from commentary by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So Gargamuni is giving Nanda Maharaj a piece of information. And the similar idea in this commentary of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is echoed by Srila Prabhupada, who paraphrases Gargamuni, disclosing a current factual occurrence. So he's revealing something, it's factual and it's current. This is Srila Prabhupada. So this is Srila Prabhupada paraphrasing. He says, The child was originally born as the son of Vasudev, although he is acting as your child. Generally, he is your child, but sometimes he is the child of Vasudev. It's a closed quote. So this is Srila Prabhupada paraphrasing what Garga Muni is communicating to Nanda Maharaj. Thus, it's clear that Garga Muni discloses the fact that the child was born of Vasudev. So, if we examine this statement by Garga Muni to Nanda Maharaj, we can look at Krishna at the time of his birth, him speaking to his parents, Vasudeva and Devaki. And he gives the reasons that he took birth from them. So we're going deeply into the truth of Garga Muni's statement to Nanda Maharaj. So this is Krishna speaking to his parents at the time of his birth. So you don't generally have a child speaking to the parents at the moment of their birth, but here is Krishna. He was in his four-armed form of Lord Vishnu at the time when he appeared in before Vasudeva and Devaki, and he gives the reasons that he took his birth from them, Vasudeva and Devaki. So this is Krishna speaking. Since I found no one else so highly elevated as you in simplicity and other good qualities of character, I appeared in this world as Prishnigarba, as one who is celebrated as having taken birth from Prishni. So this is earlier on in the 10th canto, in the 3rd chapter, in the 41st verse. So Krishna himself is giving the reason for why he took birth from Vasudeva and Devaki. So we're going to look at this particular statement that Krishna's made, giving the reason why he chose to come or take birth from Vasudeva and Devaki, their good qualities, their simplicity, and also he says, I appeared in this world as Prishnigarba. So Krishna's also talking about in a previous birth who he was. So this occurrence took place in the Treta Yuga. So this is the previous birth of Lord Krishna that he discloses to Vasudeva and Devaki. And at that time, and this is Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he's explaining it, he says that the Lord is glorified by the names Vishnu, Yagya, Prishnigarba, Sarvadeva, Urukrama, etc. And then it's in the next millennium, so that was Tetra Yuga, in the next millennium, Lord Krishna tells them he appeared again from the two of them. So Krishna's revealing this to his parents. At the time of his birth, he reveals it to them, Vasudeva and Devaki. So he tells them that he appeared again from the two of them. So there was that appearance in Tetra Yuga, and then again he appeared, Aditi being his mother, and Kashyapa being his father. So these were the previous lives of Vasudeva and Devaki. And he continues, Krishna says, because of being a dwarf, he was known as Vamana. Then Lord Krishna states, this is again talking to Vasudeva and Devaki at the moment of his appearance, O supremely chaste mother, I, the same personality, have now appeared of both of you as your son for the 3rd time. Take my words as truth. And this is in the 3rd chapter of the 10th canto, so early on in the same canto we're doing. So the interesting thing here to note is that the Supreme Lord chose his mother and father. And he chose the same mother and father from whom to take birth again and again, meaning they were different personalities in different lifetimes, but it was those same personalities or the continuance their soul passing into a different body. So those were the same personalities, and he's choosing to have them be his mother and father. So prior to his having his father and mother be Vasudeva and Devaki, Krishna originally took birth from Sutapi and Prishni, and then after that from Kashyapa and Aditi. And Lord Krishna gives a further reason for why he made these choices. So he's revealing this to his parents, Vasudeva and Devaki. In other appearances also, I took the form of an ordinary child, and here's his reason, just to become your son, so that we could reciprocate eternal love. So Krishna gives the reason for why he has taken these 3 births from these personalities, acting as his mother and father. So in fact, Krishna appeared from Devaki and Vasudeva in his fullness. So this is the important distinction between him in this birth from Vasudeva and Devaki and his appearing from Sutapa and Prishni or Aditi and Kashyapa in previous births. In those previous births, the other forms were partial expansions of his original form. So it's his original form that's now present, is appearing from Vasudeva and Devaki. So the reason this was so is due to the intense love that was developed by Prishni and Sutapa. So their intense love culminated in their next birth, with Krishna appearing as their son in his fullness. So as their love, one could say, increased in intensity, so Krishna, from being just in his partial expansion, became in his fullness. Because he gave the reason for why he actually was choosing them as his mother and father. He wanted to reciprocate with that eternal love. So he's appearing in different forms, 2 different forms, and then finally in his 3rd form, in his original form, in his fullness. So to further clarify that indeed this form is his original form, and this is important, Krishna tells Devaki and Vasudeva, and these are his words, I have shown you this form of Vishnu in order to remind you of my previous births. Otherwise, if I appeared like an ordinary human child, you would not believe that the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu had indeed appeared. So Krishna thinks of everything. So imagine how close is that relationship, that at the time of his appearance as Krishna, he's able to tell his parents, these were your previous lives, and these were the forms I was in, and I was your child. And and he's also covering the point that at the present time, why he's appearing in this form of Lord Vishnu is that he's concerned that if he were to have appeared as a small human-like child, then they wouldn't believe that it was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we'll see that they were specifically looking to have the Supreme Personality of Godhead as their child. So Krishna made an arrangement so that they could understand, and he verbalized to them, so that they truly understood that here in this 3rd time of having him as their son, he's now in his complete original form. So Krishna's reasoning was that Devaki and Vasudeva would not recognize him as God. And if he appeared in his complete original 2-armed human-like form. So after this explanation that he gives to Vasudeva and Devaki at the time of his appearance, then there's this explanation. In their presence, by his internal energy, he then transformed himself into his original form, Krishna. Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam. So he first had to make the explanation to Vasudeva and Devaki, paint the picture from the past, explain who's in the present, why he's appearing as Lord Vishnu, and then only after that did he manifest himself as a human-like, two-armed form, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam. Now, interestingly, Srila Prabhupada writes that Devaki was anxious also that the Lord transform himself into a human child. And her reason was that if her neighbors were to hear that Lord Vishnu had appeared as her child, none of them would believe it. So she really wanted him to go into a human-like form. So you can see there's a reciprocal relationship between the Supreme Lord and his parents. There was anxiety on both sides. On Lord Krishna's side, there was anxiety that they wouldn't believe that he had come if he didn't actually first show his Vishnu form. And on the part of Devaki, she wanted him to move away from that form and take his human-like form. So there's a reciprocal relationship. The Lord fulfilled her desire, and he also allowed them to have understanding of how everything had worked. So Srila Prabhupada states that this is the nature of the dealings between the Lord and his devotees. There's always that careful consideration given by Lord Krishna for the desires of his devotees, and on the part of his devotees there's always the concern in some sense to have the Lord be protected, really, because there's love. So where there's love, there's the desire to protect and care for. So Garga Muni is stating that it's actually, and this is going back to today's verse, so he's speaking to Nanda Maharaj, and he states that it's for many reasons that the son of theirs had appeared previously as the son of Vasudeva. And this is corroborated by Lord Krishna, as we heard. And from Lord Krishna, the reason is that he wanted to reciprocate that eternal love between himself and his devotees, his two devotees in particular. So if one were to examine the nature of this interaction between Lord Krishna and, let's say, one other set of parents in a previous life, and how this works, that there's this reciprocal loving exchange, we hear Krishna speaking to, this is him speaking to Aditi, so his mother in a previous life, and he says, "You have prayed to me and properly worshipped me by performing the great Payovrata ceremony for the sake of protecting your sons." Aditi was a demigoddess, and at that time the demons had overtaken the demigods, and so the demigods had lost their area of residence, and their mother Aditi had undertaken this particular vow called the Payovrata vow. And it was for the purpose of having her sons get protection. And so when Lord Krishna comes to her, he says, "You've prayed to me and properly worshipped me by performing the great Payovrata ceremony for the sake of protecting your sons. Because of Kashyapa Muni," so that's the husband of Aditi, "because of Kashyapa Muni's austerities, I shall agree to become your son and thus protect your other sons." So again, Krishna informs what he's going to do. He's very clear. So the reason this can be considered a very loving exchange is that Lord Krishna gives an explanation for why he considers this the best course of action. So he actually says, I'm going to be coming as your son, and he gives an explanation for why he thinks that's going to be the best course of action. He says, O mother of the demigods, in my opinion, almost all the chiefs of the demons are now unconquerable, for they are being protected by brahmanas, whom the Supreme Lord always favors. Thus, the use of power against them now will not at all be a source of happiness. So one can see the concern of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his devotees, and also how he's making an extremely personal arrangement because he's understanding what is required in that situation. So he's personally going to take charge of protecting Aditi, Kashyapa and their sons by appearing as their son. So on Aditi's side, she had actually this Payavrata austerity that she undertook was to actually have undivided attention or thought on the Supreme Lord. And this was a way that she had brought her mind and senses under control. And it's interesting because when one hears that this idea of bringing the mind and senses under control through undivided attention on the Supreme Lord, it can be said to be not that different from what's practiced in ISKCON temples in the current day. And Srila Prabhupada says that actually performing prescribed worship in temples of Lord Vishnu and worshipping the Lord is as good as performing the Payavrata ceremony. So yes, we're doing that, the equivalent to what Aditi did in terms of bringing the mind and senses under control. So in the current day, it's comparable to this Payavrata ceremony that Aditi had done. So continuing, in the case of Kashyapa Muni, so the husband of Aditi, he had been situated in meditational trance. So he was able to see, because remember, it's not Krishna going to be coming in his fullness, it's a plenary portion of Krishna. That form of Krishna had actually entered within Kashyapa Muni. So, he's in meditational trance. So then he transferred this potency or the spiritual strength into the womb of Aditi. So you can see that there's some similarity with the third birth of Krishna coming as Lord Krishna with Vasudeva and Devaki, because we read, and I'm quoting, while carrying the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead within the core of his heart, Vasudeva was carrying the Lord's transcendently illuminating effulgence, and thus he became as bright as the sun. So we hear of Kashyapa Muni. So Vasudeva, he's carrying the Lord within the core of his heart. Kashyapa Muni, in his meditational trance, could see that the Lord had entered there as well. So there's some similarity in the way Krishna is appearing. Of course, Krishna in his original form in the case of Vasudeva, and a plenary portion of Krishna in the case of Kashyapa Muni, which we'll remember as Vamanadev, actually. So, then carrying on with how it worked with Vasudeva, because we're looking at Garga Muni's statement that there's many reasons for why Krishna had appeared previously as the son of Vasudeva. So in the present time, there's more mentioned in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam of how this whole thing was manifesting with Vasudeva. So, thereafter, accompanied by plenary expansions, the fully opulent Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is all auspicious for the entire universe, was transferred from the mind of Vasudeva to the mind of Devaki. So this is, the transcendental arrangement that Lord Krishna made. Devaki having thus been, and this, when that transfer of Lord Krishna from the mind of Vasudeva, his heart, into the mind of Devaki took place, it was seen as a kind of initiation. Of Devaki. She was seen as being initiated by Vasudeva. And there's a comparison or a simile that's made for when Vasudeva was carrying Lord Krishna within his heart, that he had become extremely beautiful because he was carrying the original consciousness for everyone, the cause of all causes, within the core of his heart. And this is a simile, just as the east becomes beautiful by carrying the rising sun. So in terms of Prishni and Sutapa, so these were the other parents of Lord Krishna, Vasudeva and Devaki in a previous life, there's that same mood that Lord Krishna shows. And that mood is such that, and this is Srila Prabhupada writing, that Vasudeva and Devaki in their previous birth as Sutapa and Prishni underwent a severe type of penance to get the Lord as their son. So you can see this penance part, just like Aditi performed the Payavrata, Kashyapa Muni was in meditational trance, and we hear that Sutapa and Prishni, they underwent a severe type of penance to get the Lord as their son. And as a result of such austerities, the Lord agreed to appear as their son. So you can see it's always very personal. There's exchanges between the Supreme Lord and his two devotees. So as Prishni and Sutapa, Lord Krishna is agreeing to appear as their son. And in the case of Kashyapa Muni and Aditi, he's telling them, I'm going to be appearing as your son because I think this will take care of the whole problem that's happening. So he was making that arrangement. Now, coming back to where we are, the present, so to speak, Garga Muni, he's indirectly disclosing this child was originally born as the son of Vasudeva. So we're going to look at how this works. Now, this is borne out too by the description of how it is that Lord Krishna came to be seen as the son of Nanda Maharaj. And I'm going to read. When Vasudeva reached the house of Nanda Maharaj, so Vasudeva has left his prison cell and he's carried Lord Krishna, and when he reached the house of Nanda Maharaj, he saw that all the cowherd men were fast asleep. Thus he placed his own son on the bed of Yasoda, picked up her daughter, an expansion of Yogamaya, and then returned to his residence, the prison house of Kamsa. So we're getting insight into Garga Muni's statement of how it is that this child was originally born as the son of Vasudeva. There's this description. Vasudeva actually takes him to the home of Nanda Maharaj and puts him on the bed by Yasoda. And he picks up the daughter of Yasoda and returns to the prison cell of Kamsa. This is in the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 10th chapter. So here Vasudeva's normal sense of discrimination, and this is very important because, we're reading about, loving exchanges between Krishna and his mother and father. But we also have to look at the particular action that Vasudeva performed. Because after all, he's taking Nanda Maharaj and Yasoda's child, and he's bringing that child back to the prison cell of Kamsa. So you could say he's going to be endangering that child. So he's getting safety for Krishna by leaving Krishna there. But, you know, there's this question of, is he actually going to be putting the female child of Yasoda into danger? So, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he writes that the normal sense of discrimination, like, you know, I'm not going to endanger somebody else's child for the safety of mine, you know, one might think like that. It was covered by his parental love for Lord Krishna, and who had appeared as his son. So one couldn't accuse Vasudeva of callousness for sacrificing another's child in order to protect his own child. Just the fact that his sense of discrimination was covered by the great love he was carrying for Lord Krishna. So it's a fact, what Gargamuni has said, that Krishna is acting as Nanda's child. And of course, if we go back earlier on in the 10th canto, this fact that Krishna was acting as Nanda's child was helped by the particular situation that Vasudeva came into when he brought Krishna there. And that is that Mother Yasoda was exhausted by childbirth. So she became overwhelmed by sleep, and so she was not able to understand what child had been born to her. So everything was assisted in the situation to allow for the safety of Krishna, and for Krishna to be put into that situation where he was going to be acting as Nanda Maharaj's child, even though he was originally the child of Vasudeva. So, so we're going into the background of Gargamuni's statement, because he's revealing to Nanda Maharaj, he's not giving any of these details, but he does say that although he's acting as your child, so he's acting as the child of Nanda. Now, looking at the role of Yasoda, and we're able to understand that Yasoda actually, she understood that Krishna was the Supreme Lord. And she was able to understand this because she could taste Krishna's sweetness through her interactions with him. So she was able to understand. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he states that she could realize his true nature through the potency given by the Lord. So she had sufficient spiritual strength and great love for the Supreme Lord to be able to understand that he actually is the Supreme Lord with an extremely sweet nature. She could understand. And unlike Devaki, she didn't actually know. She didn't have what Krishna did with Devaki, that he actually said, look, I'm Lord Vishnu. I also was your son in 2 previous births. And now I'm going to transform myself into a human-like form, just so that you know that I really am the Supreme Lord. So Yasoda did not have that experience. So she didn't actually see the specific bodily features of Krishna in Vishnu form that she could understand, oh, this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So she didn't see the 4 arms or the Kaustubha jewel or his chakra. She saw none of that. It was merely, she got the understanding through her interaction with Lord Krishna and his extreme sweetness. So in terms of Gargamuni's comment here, that learned persons sometimes call this child Vasudeva, This can also be further clarified, and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says that it's particularly visible in the arrangement that was made with Yasoda and Devaki. So the fact that Krishna was, in some sense, also born to Yasoda isn't very well known. So the reason that Yasoda gave her fame to Devaki as the mother of Krishna is that she had developed friendship with Devaki. So this is the one interesting point of why there's an interconnection of why this child is referred to as the son of Vasudeva, and then sometimes he's also your child, as he puts it to, as Gargamuni puts it to Nanda. There's also a subtle background element, and that is that the two women had a friendship, and so Yasoda, she was able to acknowledge Devaki as the mother of Krishna because she had developed friendship with Devaki. So these were some thoughts on the intricacies of Gargamuni disclosing to Nanda Maharaj that Krishna, he's sometimes the son of Vasudeva. So if there's any thoughts on this subject matter.
Hare Krishna. When some devotees get the service of being the parents of Krishna, do all of the services last like eternally?
That's a nice question. Yes, the question that was asked was, when some devotees get the service of being parents of Krishna, does that service last eternally? So these two personalities that we're reading of here, Vasudeva and Devaki, they had two previous births, so to speak, in which they had also received Krishna in a different form as their son. So in the case of Kashyapa and Aditi, it was Krishna in the form of Vamanadev. And in the so in the present time, he's coming again in his fullness as Lord Krishna. So what is understood is that in the previous two times that Lord Krishna appeared, they had actually, both sets of parents had performed austerities to allow for Krishna to be their son, or if not Krishna in his fullness, at least a different form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead was their son. So in 3 cases, they were performing the service of being parents of the Supreme Lord. So your question is that service eternal? So these were different millenniums, 3 different millenniums that Lord Krishna appeared. So those personalities are qualified to have Krishna as their son, and the difference between the different forms, Yagya, his form as Yagya, or his form as Vamanadev, or his form as Krishna, is that their parental role didn't change, but their relationship changed in terms of an increase in love. So their love got magnified. By the time of the third birth, it had blossomed fully, because that's the explanation for why Krishna appeared in his full original form. It was to reciprocate with the expanded love. So he came in his fullness with all his beauty, all his wealth, all his fame. Everything was in fullness because their love was in that kind of fullness. So he's reciprocating. So there is eternality in the service, and the only change is the blossoming of the love. It's expanded. So hence Krishna finally in the third birth, he appears fully as himself. So that's the only difference. But yes, the service is eternal. That's the because Krishna gives an explanation of why he actually even chose them as parents, because they're performing a service, but at the same time he's choosing who he's going to have as his parents, and he chooses them because of their simplicity and their beautiful qualities. And one gets to hear something as one goes on through the pastimes of Krishna, the beautiful qualities of the parents. So it's nice to be very attentive to how they're functioning in relation to him, because that's what qualifies them in that parental role. So beautiful. So yes, an eternal service by virtue of their eternal love for Lord Krishna. Yeah. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Mataji, thank you for your class. I'm surprised, this purport is pretty short, right? I'm surprised we didn't do the next verse, and especially with verses regarding lineages and dynasties and Jasoda's babies, fathers, sisters, cousins. For me, I can't keep up with those. I have to go back and, it's hard for me to keep up. But one thing I could take from your class and this verse is that you were mentioning that Mother Jasoda, by Krishna's potency, was able to gain realization about Krishna's position or something. You were mentioning something like that. Do you remember mentioning that?
Yes. All
right, cool. Thank God. All right. So by Krishna's potency, and I would like to relate this to maybe this verse of how we can understand Krishna really through his mercy, because a lot of times we read the books, read Prabhupada's books, and you'll get the realization. But there's many pastimes where that's not true. You can't just read the books and get the realization. For example, I can't quote it, but there's a verse from the Bhagavatam, then I'll quote one from the Chaitanya Bhagavad, and then also, so basically there's that verse, since this verse mentions Vasudeva, there's that verse from the Bhagavatam 126, I believe, that says, Shushusho Shradhadanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Siyama Haseva Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishevana. When one serves the devotees, one develops Vasudeva Kataruchi. And also there's a verse from the Chaitanya Bhagavad. I'm a writer, I'm not a speaker, so I recorded this down. I can't quote it right now, unfortunately, but there's one particular pastime where Srivas Thakur was crying in ecstasy from reading Srimad Bhagavatam. And Lord Chaitanya says, the reason you're crying in ecstasy is because of my potency. Without my power, the Bhagavatam would be boring, like to most of us. You pick up a book, there's no ecstasy. So there's another pastime regarding this, where Lord Chaitanya, this is from the Ansha Leela, chapter 5. The chapter is entitled Pradyumna Mishra Takes Instructions from Ramananda Roy. Long story short, Pradyumna Mishra went up to Lord Chaitanya and says, can you tell me about Krishna? In much the same way we go up to the books or Bhagavatam and say, Krishna, tell me about yourself. The books are also personal. But Lord Chaitanya, like the books, says, I don't know anything about Krishna. So when we approach the books, we're like, oh my God, this is so boring. This is not interesting. So you know what Lord Chaitanya said to Pradyumna Mishra? He says, I don't know anything about Krishna, but go to Ramananda Roy and he'll tell you about Krishna. He's your proper blood type. And so when Pradyumna Mishra approached Ramananda Roy, long story short, he found that he appeared to have low character. And the reason I appreciate this pastime because Lord Chaitanya forced them to be humble, because a lot of times we think we can approach the Bhagavatam, just like if we approach a person, any random person, and say, can you tell me about yourself? They're like, no. Either they'll tell them you about themselves later, or they'll say, find out from my friends about me. I don't know you that well. And so if I had to ask a question, or maybe one point I really consider is that one reason why I appreciate these pastimes is because Lord Chaitanya, the same theme appears all the time. Be more humble than a blade of grass, because a lot of times we think, the people are likely to help us can't, because Lord Chaitanya or Lord Krishna didn't authorize it. Just like the irony of blood transfusions, that the most likely person to help you is not your biological family, but somebody outside your family. So what are some steps we can move? I mean, these are just some points to consider. So what do you say to a person who's always given the advice of read Prabhupada's books, and at the same time they can't read them because they're not developing any taste. They're not really seeking a person to inspire them, because you can't just approach the books like that. There's so many verses, read the books. I try, but it's too boring. So what is a person to do, if they're always giving that advice? But I kind of say there's other advice, like approach a person and be humble with everyone, and give up these offenses. Then Krishna will show you your blood type.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you answered your question through your comments and exploring the issue that you were bringing up of how it is that one can actually experience some of that ecstasy or happiness because of understanding Krishna, through approaching Krishna through the books, because you were pointing out how it can actually be such that even though one's approaching Krishna in the books, it seems that one is experiencing or not experiencing ecstasy. Instead, one is actually feeling a little dull, or that the subject matter is even dull. So you answered the question through looking at the subject yourself of the humble mood being a very important component in the whole picture. And I mean, from this particular little verse, the significant thing that's emerged is that these great personalities underwent austerities and penances to be able to see the lotus feet or take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. So that humbleness is, I guess, in some sense shaped by undertaking austerities or penances. So like the Payavrata was compared to, or the one that Aditi had undertaken, was compared by Srila Prabhupada to performing worship in the temple that we're doing. So just continuing to perform that worship in a very personal way, thinking that one wants that to be pleasing to the Supreme Lord, and continuing to perform service in that way, one is shaping the humbleness, because it takes sacrifice to be able to perform such service. I mean, one sacrificing, you know, stimulating one's senses in another way. So by making that kind of choice, it's already pleasing the Supreme Lord, and then when one performs the worship, wishing to do it for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, his heart is touched, and he reciprocates. He reciprocates that one is wanting to do something for him, and the reciprocation is such that one experiences the pleasure and the happiness of Lord Krishna, and so one is more inspired to continue to perform the service. So it's a reciprocal thing. It keeps going, and as it's going, the humbleness develops because one realizes one's dependence on the Supreme Lord. One's dependent on his reciprocation to be able to perform those austerities, to be able to continue doing those acts of sacrifice. So that's a very humbling thing, to realize one is dependent on Lord Krishna's reciprocation. So, and that's how that good quality of humbleness develops. Acknowledging that without Krishna's reciprocation, how would one be able to do that? Yeah, that's a comment.
Thank you. Those are very nice answers. I appreciate your point where you mentioned dependence. That caught my mind. And the reason I appreciate this pastime, one last point that brought to mind when you mentioned the word dependence, is that there's that verse we were reading in the Gita class yesterday: whatever action a great man performs, common men should follow, etc. Leader. And in this chapter, Ansha Leela chapter 5, Lord Chaitanya, of course we should, like, I'm sure we probably should follow his example, you know, in all likelihood, he's the greatest leader. And in this pastime, he even says, I'm dependent. On Ramananda Roy, he took instructions from Ramananda Roy. He was a sannyasi, and Ramananda Roy was a Sudra and a householder, but he was a sannyasi in a Brahmana family, but he took help. And the reason I love this pastime is that the first verse in this pastime, it actually mentions that Lord Chaitanya is a physician, the greatest physician, doctor. Who could be the greatest physician? But the reason in this pastime we see that a physician or a doctor, it doesn't matter how great of a doctor one is, a doctor will humbly admit that I can't help a sick patient who needs a blood transfusion. The doctor admits, I'm dependent on another person to give you the blood, to help you. And so Lord Chaitanya says, even though I'm the greatest physician, the first verse mentioned he's the greatest physician, but he says, go to Ramananda Roy. He has your blood type. I don't have your blood type. And so I'm dependent, even though the greatest physician, it doesn't matter how great of a doctor one is, a doctor in the material world, they have to be humble. You know, I could perform surgery, but I can't give you my help is limited. I need the blood transfusion from somebody else, whether they're rich, poor, ignorant. Nobody goes up to a poor person and say, I only take rich people blood. You take whatever blood you get, whatever's your blood type, rich, poor, etc. So that's why Lord Chaitanya says, I'm not a Brahmana, etc. I'm not a Vaishya, etc. Anyway, I just want to appreciate that point where the Lord says, I'm dependent, so we should follow his example. You know, why are we acting like we're independent? And that's some points I appreciated that you were mentioning. Even the Lord says he's dependent. Of course, he's not, obviously. Anyway.
Yeah, well, that's very nice. Thank you for your comments, Jai Baladev, that even the Supreme Personality of Godhead is directing somebody to a devotee. And we find often the spiritual master does that. He directs one to, yes, some instructing devotee, and that in itself is extremely challenging, because it's always easier to take the authority of, you know, the person at the top. One understands this is the personality who heads everything. This is the most exalted personality. So it's easy to go through the motions of at least some subservience, some willingness to serve. It's more difficult when somebody is not that at that high rung, it's a little bit lower. Then one has to make all kinds of adjustments And that in itself is very educative, because one has to learn to be respectful even to persons that aren't on that very topmost rung. They are sort of, somewhat lower position. So one has to adjust one's concepts. One has to learn to be able to be as respectful to that person on the lower rung as the person on, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead on the topmost rung, and see that person as an extension of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when one develops that kind of understanding where one sees the connection of others to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it becomes easier to even have that humbleness, that sense of I'm also dependent on the help of those lesser than the Supreme Personality of Godhead because of their connection to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's a very valuable lesson in itself. So thank you for highlighting that point of even how Lord Chaitanya was instructing. We see that instruction going on, and it's extremely educative. It helps to, I guess, break down some of those independent concepts one has that make one even resistant to others that we know we may be dismissing. So, and you highlighted that initially Ramananda Roy's external was questioned. This is what happens. One has to go through adjustment, and that adjustment is growth. Yeah. So thank you for that comment. Thank you very much for your kind attendance. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.